Meet Tsige and Fitsum. She's an internal medicine doctor, and he's a neurology nurse at the same hospital in Twin Cities, Minnesota.
She's my boss.
While they were both born and grew up in Ethiopia, Fitsum is Eritrean and Tsige is from the heart of Tigray, the northernmost region of Ethiopia that borders Eritrea. Eritrea and Tigray are essentially at war. I'm joined now by Tsige and Fitsum. Fitsum is an Eritrean born and raised in Ethiopia, and Tsige is Tigrayan born and raised in the heart of Tigray. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to have this important conversation with me. I first want to give you an opening to say a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds.
Ladies first.
Thanks. So my name is Tsige Gabriel-Selassie. Just like Carmela said, currently I'm a physician in the Twin Cities or St. Paul, Minnesota. I work in a local hospital here. I was born and raised in Nevala, Tigray, and that is basically in the heart of Tigray. It's called Mbasneti. And I moved here actually about 16 years ago now. I've been in the U.S. for about 16 years. And I'll have you introduce yourself now.
All right. I was born in Ethiopia, south of Ethiopia, in a place called Karamagis, this Oromo land. I left Ethiopia in '98 when the war started between Ethiopia and Eritrea. So we had to go through the border. We were in Kenya for 2 years and came to the US at the end of 2000. Right now, I'm a nurse at the same hospital. She's my boss.
That's nice.
I love that.
And we have a daughter.
Great, congratulations. Amazing. So, we've been through conflicts before, like you just mentioned, the border war. So with both of your backgrounds, as much as they have in common, at a time like this, it could make things a little bit more complicated when you're having conversations about what's going on, talking to your family. So how have you guys sort of managed this last year?
Well, I think for sure, for us as a couple, it's actually interesting that this conflict itself hasn't caused intermarriage conflict. And the reason I would say is it has to do with our backgrounds, actually. So him and I met in Chicago back in 2011, I want to say, 2011, 2012. And at that time, we had a solid friendship for a few years. And when we started the relationship, we started it consciously, and we talked about what the biggest issues would be in our future marriage. And we identified one of them as being political. So basically the conflict between Tigray and Eritrea was going to be one of the biggest issues that we would face in our future, despite who won or lost. Because of, as you know, there was a Cold War for that many years between, Hawat and Eritrea, Ethiopia and Eritrea, basically. So we knew that at some point that was going to be an issue. It was either one was going to lose regardless, and one of us were going to be happy while the other one is grieving, and vice versa. We just didn't know who it was, and we talked about how we were going to support each other. So
if I just may add something, you can continue after.
Sure.
What we said is, if Eritrea wins, obviously I'm going to be happy, but I'm going to be sad because she's not happy. Because there's going to be a problem on her side. And if Ethiopia wins, then I'm not going to be happy. Her family may be safe, but she will not be happy because I'm not happy. So we talked about scenarios, what could happen, like when we started dating, before we moved forward. So go ahead.
Yeah, so basically obviously we never would have imagined this was going to be a full-blown war, right, between what we're seeing today. But when it actually started on November 3rd, I am kind of interested in American politics, you will say, more, and he's interested more in Horn of Africa politics. So I remember him, like, I'm hooked to the television when, just watching the American election results. And then he tells me, hey, war just started in Ethiopia. And I was like, wait, what is going on? And so just starting from that day on, personally, like Fitsum and I, we have really just talked. It's a lot of talk. It's a lot of discussion. It's a lot of talk. And I mean, you can add whatever I'm missing, but we talk a lot, and sometimes it's very tense. As my people are there, I mean, my immediate family, parents and siblings and nieces and nephews that I have personally invested a lot, right? Not just blood, but invested my time, my energy, my money and everything, is basically been lost. So this is like a personal loss as well. And so sometimes it can become very personal. And I think that at that time, what has brought us together is really discussing and understanding each other's emotions. When I'm going through something, I am thankful he says, you know what, I understand. Or even when I'm mad with people that maybe don't understand me, he's like, it's okay. This is super personal. It's really difficult for people to go beyond personal. When he says those things, it helps me understand. I will tell you that, despite, I mean, he's also just him having a heart, right? Like a caring heart. So there's times where he would see something injustice happening in the middle of Tigray, and he would say this shouldn't happen. So for me, it's very refreshing to hear those things, right? And he shed tears too, right, for the war. So knowing that is what grounds us together, that we care about people, and we may have different political ideas and understandings and opinions, but at the foundation, we actually care about people, and we grieve for the people that are being hurt and that are losing.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into, people with a heart, like needing to have that, needing to see that in our partners and in our friendships and our family. But that the way news is shared makes that complicated, is what I found. So you present something to someone, like me personally, I shared the Aksum massacre back in the day when it was in CNN. And then somebody that I was close to just basically was like, oh God, like, this is all so exaggerated. Who knows if this is true? This is like an information war. So in that moment, that person, and now I can kind of understand why, cannot connect empathetically, because it feels like it's a political game that's being played. So have you guys run
what's true and what's not? So like when you talk about the Aksum massacre, when the news came out, she was doing fundraising for, what's the hospital name? And
for Eider, we were doing an online fundraising for Eider Hospital.
Yeah, so I was present to support her, and they did well. And there was this professor talking about that, and denying that TPLF attacked the military, the Ethiopian federal military. So he's a professor. There's professor in front of his name, and when he says like that, if people don't follow, there are a lot of white Americans, they're going to believe him. But I was shocked, like, how does someone purposely lies like that? When he was talking about the massacre, for me, I didn't know if it was true or false. It's just a question mark. Did it happen or did it not happen? I don't know. But TPLF started the war. That I know because they told me. And I mentioned it during the fundraising. I said TPLF started the war. He said no. I said they told us I can speak the language. I heard the president saying it. So it's hard to sort through what is true and what is not. Still, if you don't, you have to spend a lot of time on these things. To get to the bottom of the truth, who's lying, who's not. She's busy.
Well, I'll just say, Hermela, One of our biggest conflicts in our personal life is actually he spends a lot of time trying to sift through the information, and I will say that finding out the truth is really difficult, as you know, in general, let alone in East Africa, even in the U.S. Right? What's happening in the U.S. The truth is really difficult because every newspaper, every news media has its own agenda, right? So you have to sift through, and so he spends a lot of time even on our daily life looking through the internet, and I obviously just was like, what is this, what are you doing? But so for me, I think one of the things that has been difficult in terms of sorting out information is it really is incredibly difficult to find, for me to even like, is it Al Jazeera, is it CNN, is it New York Times, is it what are the Ethiopian medias? Is it like
Fana.
Fana?
It's the Habesha, yeah.
Is
It's
it the
a
Habesha?
full-time job. It is a full-time job to try to connect all
Exactly.
these dots. Yeah.
So it's really incredibly difficult, and like my Tigrinya and my Amharic are not the best. So I'm trying to like find this in English even worse, right? Even difficult, right? So how did I get my information before the war started? I traveled. So I actually, over the last 15 years, I've traveled to Ethiopia 4 times. And 4 of the times, I have either done volunteer work in hospitals, or I had taken buses and local transportations and sat under trees to just communicate with local people against all advices that I've got from my family. I'll tell you an example where I traveled from Humara all the way to Bahardar on a public bus against the will of my family during the Gondar unrest. And truly, it's because that day I believed that nobody will touch me because I'm Tigrayan. I think that was, I don't think an Amara person will come and kill me and really like do terrible things to me because I'm a Tigrayan. So that was to try to prove that to the people that were saying, don't go because somebody's going to kill you because you're Tigrayan. I had to just go against that will. And I actually, what is it called? I like hid myself from my family and left basically without their knowledge. I like set up my own ride and stuff. And I can tell you, what I learned from that was the people that took care of me, which were the driver and Radat, they paid for my meals. They knew I'm Tigrayan fully. They knew I'm coming from America. I sat in the back, right behind the drivers, and they like bought my meals. They took care of my bags. They transferred me to the next bus. And so the kind of hospitality I received was contrary to what I was being told by my family. And my family loved me, right? They care. And that's why they say, don't go, because they thought I was going to be in harm's way, right? And what I grieved about that day was, it is so unfortunate that many Tigrayans, including my family, believe that the general Amara population is against them. I knew Ethiopia before the war, but in 2016 is when I traveled again to Ethiopia, and I was at the Gorambesa, and I really said that day, this country is in danger. It's leading towards a terrible front because people aren't heard. I went to Mekelle and I'm just sitting under a tree, just talking to under like one of those local like shops, and outside you can have bunna and tea and stuff. I'm sitting there and I'm talking to like a young boy, like maybe mid-20s, and I was talking to him like, how are you feeling about this country? And he said to me, well, what if you're not an undercover person trying to like spy on me? And when I heard that, I was like, young people have no hope in this country, so something is going to blow up. It's only a matter of time. You have a vacuum that's been created. So like, that's how I gathered my information. I never cared about the Habesha, the CNN, the New York Times before the war. And it was really interesting to me when a lot of Tigrayans in Ethiopia actually went back and started business 2016, 2017, 2018, as you probably remember, there was a huge influx of people going back to Ethiopia. And I was like, what are these people doing? This country is not stable as it is right now. And I think I would like to think that these people failed to connect with the common people and not understand where the country was. And I felt like at that time I had maybe a better understanding of what was going on, because I was traveling, I was talking to people that really, majority of the people that didn't have access to the elites that were leading Ethiopia at that time. When things happened like Aksum massacre or other things, I would ask my Tigrayan friends, hey, like, how do you know? And I mean, people would be really angry at me that I even asked that question, because it was like, what do you mean? Aren't you Tigrayan? Aren't you supposed to know this? And I'm like, wait, how am I supposed to know this? I don't have like a phone. I'm not connecting with people in Tigray. I was truly just, I'm like, how do we know this is true? Like, how are we making, like, who's reporting it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to know. And I'm actually by nature, like, I like to know, which is why I'm in medicine. I like to know how my body works. I like to know how things work. And so it was really tough. And that has been a big source of conflict in my community. As soon as I ask, it's like, oh, you're questioning this. You're not a part of us. You're not Tigrayan. Aren't you Tigrayan? Aren't you supposed to know this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, so it's been very confusing, to say the least, in terms of knowing the truth and not knowing the truth.
Yeah, you actually went into the next question anyway, just based on what you're saying and your experiences and what you know about the country, and knowing that your Tigrayanness does not put you in danger anywhere you go. And so how do you reconcile that, and you're already touching on this, with the narrative of this is all about genocide, you know, everybody hates Tigrayans? How is there anybody that kind of questions it like you do, or questions certain events just for the sake of knowing? Or do you find that there's not really a lot of people like you that are Tigrayan that ask questions?
Well, I have lost a lot of friendships during this, a lot of family relationships as well as friend relationships. I'm gonna say that for me, like, so was in the Tigrayan community, I would say that I don't know if I don't know that many people that are questioning the status quo. Okay. What I would say about, you know, like I listened to your interview with the former TPLF founder. That is exactly what I believe. Okay. Why, like, the genocide agenda is like, is genocide happening? I don't know. But and it could very much be happening. However, the idea that, like, the Amhara people, the Oromo people, the rest of Ethiopia is rising against the ethnicity of Tigrayan just because we're Tigrayan is something that it's hard for me to swallow. And the reason is I have experienced it personally as a Tigrayan person. I have been cared by Oromo people, by Amhara people, by Walaita people, by so many people. And I've traveled from Awasa all the way to Humara to Shire to everywhere by Tigrayan people. It is, and I still have friends in all of those in Ethiopia and Addis, you know, everywhere. So it is incredibly difficult for me to fathom that these people would harm Tigrayans just because we're Tigrayans. However, the narrative that your former guest spoke about, why Tigrayans feel the threat, is it's in my opinion, it's fear. The whole, if the Tigrayans over the last however many years, especially over the last 2 years, have basically been told that everybody's against them. And that fear narrative is, I think, what's driving a lot of this. And this happens everywhere. This is happening in America too. If we pay attention, the reason, I mean, I'm just gonna say, the reason Donald Trump won 2016 is because he used fear narrative. Fear is a very important and what weapon? It's a very effective weapon to try to bring people against each other and to try to divide people. So, and man, I mean, I don't have to repeat what your former guest said, but he's hit it. Really, he's hit the nail in the head. Correct?
No, you're right. The part specifically about, you know, they're told they're coming to get you, sort of some of the brainwashing that happened, particularly in the last few years as a way of mobilizing people to get ready to fight.
That, and I think also what's gone on for many years, where the Tigrayan people haven't actually benefited from the regime that passed from EPDRF. I don't believe Tigrayan people actually benefited from it. However, they're staged as they have benefited from it. And so the rest of Ethiopia believes that Tigrayans actually benefited from EPDRF, which is not true, because I know what Tigray looks like because I've traveled there. And in fact, many non-Tigrayans who have traveled to Tigray will actually denounce that narrative that Tigrayans have benefited from EPDRF. Because truly Tigrayans haven't benefited. Because the example I will give you is where I was raised in Nabelet. The high school that we went to, 1st to 8th grade, was built by Haile Selassie. And then until I came to the US, around like 2003, 2004, only some rich person came and built a high school. Until then, our family was traveling 3-4 days to be in a high school. So the idea that Tigrayans actually have benefited from EPDRF is a false narrative. And yet, Tigrayans are getting killed currently because of that narrative, because of the narrative that's been built over so many years. Him and I disagree on this a little bit, but again, that's what I believe because I've traveled and I've been in it. This is part of my experience.
Yeah, to answer your question, how do you find the truth, Hermela? I spend a lot of time online, finding the track record of individuals or news organizations when they make, a silly lie that you can disprove easily. Then after that, I don't listen to them anymore. So you have to do a lot of sorting. If you want to know what's going on, listen to the leaders of TPLF. Go to their website. Go to the federal government website and read what they're saying. That's what I do. I spend a lot of time reading what they're saying, and they tell you the truth. It's not that complicated. So it takes a lot of time though, but people don't have time. They have to make a living. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of confusion. For those of us who waste our time doing that, it's very simple. You don't know everything 100%, but you know enough to be confident. But that's not the case for a lot of people. So that creates conflict. If you're not agreeing on, a reality, TPLF, for example, TPLF started a war. I mean, you just have to listen to your own leader. But if you talk to people who support TPLF, they say no, then you're two different worlds. How are you going to agree? Mm-hmm. So I just advise people, if they have time, just, listen to all the different groups. What are they saying? And then in time, you can learn who's a liar and who's not a liar.
Yeah, people ask me like, what source can I go to? And then I think every source I have is flawed, like to your point, if you find a lie, leave it alone. It's like, but it's sort of like you've got nothing left if after that. And one of the ways that we figured out about the humanitarian aid that was redirected to war is exactly what you're saying, listening to the leaders, because they eventually, if somebody's lying, they'll eventually tell on themselves. To Tsige's point, I'm curious to hear what part of the narrative she shared about the perception of Tigrayans that you disagree with.
So two parts. One, I don't think the war started because of that. It's not because Ethiopians believed Tigrayans have benefited. not only the people, there are people who believe that, to a certain degree I do too, but the war started, the leadership of TPLF, they say, $30 billion have left the country is what they say. And we know how they live here, right? Their children, she tells me, people she knows how they live here, their life. And even though this leadership, robbed the country, when TPLF lost power, they were given a chance to go away with the money. That was not the reason. That did not even create war. The Ethiopian people were like, okay, from my understanding, they said, okay, let them steal whatever they stole. Can we move forward so we can live peacefully? They were, I used to follow a lot of discussion they had. They would say, if we go for justice, then we create war. If we go and arrest everybody, then there's a danger of war. So which one do we choose? It's a very, complicated issue. Morality, you say justice should be served. But if it's going to lead to war, then maybe we should avoid it. And that's what the Ethiopian government did, as far as I understand it. They tried to arrest some of them, but the majority, they were just told, take whatever you stole. Can we live in peace now? That was not good enough for them. They had to be on top. They have to dominate. They don't want to live without dominating 100 millions of people. So they prepared themselves for war. They tried many peaceful attempts were declined. They would send priests and athletes. They're going begging them in Tigray. And finally, they attacked the federal military. They took all the military equipment. They thought they could win. In my opinion, as Eritrean, thank God for Eritrea. Ethiopia is still intact. Ethiopians need to understand the contribution of Eritrea here. If Eritrea did not get involved, then we can say Eritrea got involved because they sent missiles to Eritrea too. That's a good enough reason for Eritrea to get involved. They have to defend themselves. But if TPLF did succeed, can you imagine where Ethiopia would be today? 100 millions of people, chaos. And that was their goal. Take all the military equipment. We can go back to Addis Ababa Strait they want to, or disintegrate the country. The country, they've created hate among people based on ethnicity. We know how human nature works. It's easy for us to hate based on differences. So that's why the war started. The war did not start because people believed the Tigrayan people have benefited. That's another discussion that we can have, but that's not the cause of the war.
I would just say, if we go back to like the war, it started, I think I also do believe that, the command was basically attacked, and that's why war started. And it's actually, for me, I think it's not just what happened in Ethiopia, but it's what happened in this country. The worst war that happened in America, and reading American history too, I like history, so is basically the Civil War in 1860 happened because the South attacked a military command in
a garrison
in a fort. And Abraham Lincoln and the leaders before him had been begging the South to avoid war and to abolish slavery and other things that I'm not going to get into peacefully. And when the South refused, there was tolerance from the North. However, when the South actually attacked a military fort, a full-blown out war started. So attacking him, I'm not a military analyst by any means, but history repeats itself many times. So I do believe, and it's when I heard Getachew Reda actually saying we went and attacked the Northern military, that I said, well, then I'm going to believe what you tell me. Before that, though, the federal government was saying it, everybody was saying it. I, again, didn't believe it because everybody's got their own agenda. But I think that why, and I wasn't really going to talk about this, but since we're in this, I will, I guess, take the risk to say, in my own opinion, the EPDRF, which is TPLF, failed the Tigray people for a few reasons. Number one is they never solved the border conflict between Amhara and Tigray region. For that many years, this area was a bombshell. It was never resolved. And when the war started, so many people, including those of my own family, got displaced by angry people that they claimed this land was theirs. Okay? They got shipped by buses. Their homes got burned. We know this is true because we've spoken to family members that had come from Humora and Dansha and other places, as we have immediate families there. So I think TPLF should have solved this issue a long time ago. Number two is, if it was gonna say that we benefited, if it was gonna put the narrative that they actually benefited the people of Tigray, they should have just benefited them, right? I always say Eritrea has Sawa, where everybody goes through military training. The Tigray people never went through military training, but they actually were staged as they went through military training. So wouldn't it have been better to actually prepare your own people so they can defend themselves? So when the war broke out, they were like sitting geese, basically. TPLF couldn't protect them. They actually they had to go to the mountains to try to remobilize people. But in the meantime, so many people got hurt. So many people got destroyed. Okay, war is a terrible thing. They couldn't defend themselves. And this is, again, I'm hearing it from my own family members that are experiencing this. So I already wasn't a supporter of TPLF before the war because I really didn't think their policy supported the people of Ethiopia in general. But I think the people of Tigray got harmed and have suffered unbelievable suffering within this last 30 years. At the beginning to put them in power, now again, right now with the current war. And I think I see it as a failure of TPLF than a failure of anybody else.
I'm curious too, because you have a stronger connection to Tigray and Tigrayans. So a lot of these perspectives that we hear on the world stage is diaspora, right? Diaspora somehow speaking for the people there, and many of us haven't spent that much time there, right? So I'm curious, like if you have, I'm curious if you have insight on the average Tigrayan on the ground, what they might be thinking, because if you listen to the activists and the TPLF officials, it's like they feel like TPLF is the only thing that can protect them. This war is necessary. It's about survival. But I've always wondered, what does that average mom or son who just really wants to live a normal life, never got much of anything, actually think at this point in the war, especially 1 year in?
So I don't have an answer to what they might be thinking right now because I haven't spoken to them. But I can tell you what they thought before then, right? I will tell you what one older man said to me, who's lived through Derg, Haile Selassie, and the current government, or I guess EPDRF. And he said to me, Derg killed by day, EPDRF kills by night. At the end of the day, both kill. This is a farmer in the middle of Tigray who said this to me. So what does that tell you? The people of Tigray themselves didn't believe that after Derg fell and EPDRF came to power, only selected people benefited from that power, which in any case, they would benefit, right? Like probably right now, people that are close to prosperity parties are probably benefiting more than other people too, right? Like it's a nature. Basically, he was saying true democracy, true representation didn't happen just because EPDRF came to power. So the people of Tigray believed that TPLF or EPDRF didn't necessarily benefit them the way they had expected it. How they're thinking right now, I can guess. They probably think that TPLF is their only way out, because that is the only thing they know. And again, once the war started, one woman told me, what is the saying? Better you, yeah. كم تفلطوا
The devil you know.
كم زي تفلطوا ملاخ تفلطوا شيطان يحيش.
Yes. Yeah. The devil you know is better than the angel you don't know.
You don't know. Exactly. This is what, so many Tigrayans, whether they're here or in diaspora or within, they knew that EPDRF didn't do good for them. But they are willing to forgive and rally with them and go on. Because right now, because many of them are also losing their loved ones, their houses, their belongings, everything is lost. So what do they have to lose? Which I think is a reasonable place to be, right? Like I tell Fitsum, for us to sit here and talk about the war in Ethiopia is a privilege. People don't have this platform. They don't have this privilege to sit and talk, you know, and at the end of the day, what people want, any human, wherever you go, want is a place to live, to work peacefully, and to create a better opportunity for their children. Where that doesn't exist, life is kind of just terrible, right? So people want that. And I will tell you that that's what they want in Tigray too. Even when everything is blocked, when they can't reach their loved ones, when they can't talk to people, when they can't send their kids to school, when they can't get the medications they need, that's what they want too. Who's going to bring that is the question. And I think at this point, they do believe that TPLF is probably the one that brings them that peace.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So it's, yeah, this sort of, you know, only choice was kind of created, in my opinion, to some degree too. But at the end of the day, if that's what people feel, that's a reality that we all have to deal with, right? In terms of trying to talk this through. Fitsum, I'm curious, when you hear that, or I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it, right? But when you hear that perspective and these stories, how has that maybe shaped or shifted some of your perspective on the war?
Many feelings as a, you know, as an Eritrean, you know, we've, you know, not me personally, I didn't go much through a lot, but Eritreans have gone through a lot because of TPLF. So there's bad history there. So it's confusion. I would say confusion because I hold TPLF responsible for the suffering of their own people, Tigrayans. You know, and before that, you know, Eritrean people since '98. The war started in '98. They mobilized the whole of Ethiopia against that small country, and then the sanction, the Cold War. So they've taken Eritrean people through hell and back. Now they're doing that to their own people too, Tigrayans. And they did that to, you know, the general Ethiopian public when they were in power, and now in Amhara region too, the regions that they were controlling, and the Afar people, you know, they took them through hell too. So I feel sorry for Tigray people, of course. I separate the Tigrayan people into, like that professor, he knows exactly what's going on in lies. I don't understand those kind of people. Like, I don't know how they live. I don't know how they sleep at night. The leadership of TPLF, I don't know how these people live. I don't know how they sleep. Like, how do you live like that? Like, knowing what you're doing. Like, if I do something wrong, like, I have to apologize so I can have a peace of mind, you know? And these people, they know it's leading to destruction. So these people I hold responsible, and I don't understand them. They're psychos. They need to be in asylum or something. And then the general public of Tigray, and they need to understand other people's experience too, so they can have an open heart. I tried to talk to her siblings in a civilized way, trying to explain our pain so we can come to some kind of understanding. But if you don't open up, it's hard. Uh, you know, when Eritreans were going through a lot of hardship, Tigrayans were just living their life. No one cared. Ethiopian in general too, right? Um, like it's exhausting what we went through since '98. Like, after I came back from Eritrea, I did my service. I was exhausted and I dropped. I stopped doing it and I was like, let me pay attention on my life. This thing is exhausting, And there are people who are still doing it, who did it before '98 during the 30 Years War. These people don't have rest. They only rested for 7 years. So when you add all this, is confusion, but like this doesn't need to happen, Like why are we doing this? But specifically talking about Tigrayans, it's sad when her father recorded a message and sent it to her, and I couldn't watch the whole video. Like I had to go away and cry a little bit, because I know him personally. He was here. So it's confusion. And I hate the people who are creating this suffering for everybody.
And Hermela, I'll just say a couple of things there. Empathy and sympathy are very important. We learn this in medicine as we get trained. For me to understand somebody's suffering, I must put myself in their position. The moment I dismiss their suffering, do I just really lose the connection that I ought to have with that person? So I will just tell you, before the war, again, I traveled and I had a lot of friends from the Amara region, Oromo region, everywhere. And they tell me their experience of what EPDRF was doing. And I bring that back to my own community, the Tigrayan community, and oftentimes that suffering was dismissed, if that makes sense. And I didn't appreciate that. Personally, I struggled, like, why do we dismiss somebody's story to kind of elevate our own suffering, right? So it is an important thing that I appreciate about Fitsum. So for example, he says he didn't suffer that much, but he left in the middle of the night from Addis at the age of 14 or whatever age you were, 7th grade, to cross a border from undercover car from Addis all the way to the border of Kenya and then cross Kenya by foot. Okay. That to me is a huge story, and it's I have to be empathetic of that story. I didn't go through that, right? And so every time somebody says I suffered under some regime, we have to understand that. And a lot of times my Tigrayan friends would argue with me that Tsagabu, that the Oromo are complaining about what's about the land and when the land grab happened. It's Tsagabu that the Amara are complaining. They just want this one old, what is it called? Hatzaynet or something. They want
power back.
They want the old power back. And I see the mother that walked on foot from Central Shua all the way to Kurambasa to give her child some medication. I will tell you a story. I was staying at a hotel in Addis when I was working at the Kurambasa, and I was at a hotel and I met this woman who had a 16-year-old daughter who brought from Central Shua, Central Amara, and she had a tumor in the back of her brain, and so it caused her to go blind. The 16-year-old girl was blind. And as you know, such a chaotic health system in Ethiopia, her appointment was like today, and then the doctor couldn't see her that day. And this woman didn't have a place to sleep. So she was sleeping in the compound of the Kurambesa. And I just couldn't take it anymore. So what I did was I actually rented a taxi, and it was only a 5-minute walk to my hotel, but she couldn't walk. She's blind. So I rented a taxi and I took her to the hotel, and I told them, this is my mother, this is my relative, and this is her daughter. and I'm gonna do a night shift at the Quran Bessa, and I'm just gonna put her in this hotel, like in my room. My room had computers, money, whatever. And I let them sleep there. And the next day, she was in so much gratitude, and she eventually underwent brain surgery, the girl. But that was an Amara woman that went through that. And all this Amara woman wanted was just a good healthcare for her daughter. I don't think she cares if it's Hatsa Yohannes or Haile Selassie or Menelik or Meles that's in power. And then the same thing happened for another woman who was in Tigray. So at the end of the day, I believe people just want peace and to live in good peace and health. And when people say, I have been harmed by a regime, we must have a sympathy to do that. And I think it's awfully difficult for a lot of, I would say I've been in contentious argument with my Tigrayan friends because they tell me, Tsagabi, they build like 7-lane highway to Awas. And I'm like, that highway, none of the Oromo farmers use it, by the way. In fact, it's devastating that the 6th highway lane have been created because the farmers have to lose their land. You know what I mean? So
you know what's interesting is you're touching on something that I haven't fully been able to process, but have thought about, which is the politicization of suffering. Because I think that's what hurts everybody, like everybody from every ethnicity group, where it's, it's all filtered through the power struggle or the power filter, right? And so it's made otherwise good people but otherwise empathetic people, just like you said, deny other people's suffering, amplify their own suffering. So I'm curious, what do you, because people ask me this question and I don't have an answer yet. So what do you think is going to take for people to come together just a little bit, right? Because you really have such a polarization, at least in the diaspora. I don't know if it's as true on the ground because people, like you said, are just trying to live and they don't see each other in that way. But we've seen stories where people within the government or that are living in Addis and other parts are actually working with the TPLF, and that doesn't help Tigrayans at all either. So what do you guys see as some of the potential ways to bridge that gap?
I would say it has to start from being honest. I think honesty takes you far. I think people just need to be honest, but the fear is, I think, what makes them dishonest. I think they become dishonest to defend what they think is valuable, as far as I understand it. But if people are honest, then you can acknowledge other people's suffering, and then that can disarm people. Like if you're suffering and then, during the protests to overthrow TPLF, if Tigrayans were sympathetic, they would have, like when you're suffering, personally, if someone understands and sees you, like it just disarms you, and if they don't, then create something inside you that lasts long. I don't know, maybe hate or you become a little bit careless on their suffering too. It's human nature to say, when I suffer, they didn't care. Why should I care when they're suffering? So it's one country. People have to live together, and I don't know. People need to see the big picture. We need to start learning to live together, let alone us within one country, Ethiopia and Eritrea, 2 different countries. We need to learn to live together, even though we're not the same country. And I think it starts with honesty. People just need to let other people talk and then listen. And if it's not true, you say it's not true, give me evidence, and then they bring the evidence. Who's telling you? Does this person has an agenda? And that goes back to your other question, the earlier question, how do you sort through what is true and what is not true? And people get their news from only their own side. These people get their news from their own side, and they live in completely 2 different worlds. And this is a problem humans deal in every country. Here, the Democrats, the Republicans, They hate each other.
Well, and to make matters worse, you can unclick and get rid of people that you don't like, you know, so you really
And then,
You
and then you
narrow
just,
out, you narrow
Yeah.
the echo chamber. You just talk and you hear it repeated back.
yeah. So people have to go out of their own circle. We're all human beings. For God's sake, just, we speak the same language, our culture is the same. Most of us are Habesha, Oromo are not Habesha, but it's the same country, like the history is the same.
Yeah.
They put the Ottawa thing together. It's one country, yes, there are historical injustices, but, it should not be denied. It should be accepted. But the people who are living now didn't do it. They just need to accept. The people who are living right now should just accept bad things that happened, long time ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know. People need to be honest.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's hard though. It's not easy.
Gosh, he touched on so many things, so I'll try to give my answer here, and I'll give it from a somewhat of a newer perspective, and also tied with my professionalism here. We just had a daughter, and I've always dealt with death, right? My profession, I see people that are completely healthy come to me with a backache, and I can diagnose them with terminal illness, right? So I see death every day, and it never matters what you believed, what you didn't believe, what you did, what you didn't do. You're gonna die. We all are gonna die, right? But we live as though we're gonna live forever, right? I know this sounds like very existential thing and whatnot, but at the end of the day, we all. I told you I deal with death, and recently I just had a daughter. So now all of a sudden I could see that this new tiny human being that just showed up in this world, everybody showed up that way, right? And then everybody's gonna just end up the same way. And what we do in that middle life, that is at most like 50 years, if we're lucky, that's given to us, that's healthy. Like, can we